In this video, we're going to take our xPexplosiaFX information to render it inside the volume of our number one. So let's go to our one smoke scene. Let's go to Open, and here we are in our MoGraph Countdown folder. One smoke. The last saved scene is this one. And in this scene, we have our xPexplosiaFX sim, which is very similar to the Advect one, but we have got more and more bits of smoke coming out, and then we have them penetrating this bit of number one geometry. So that's the basic sim. Now, the reason we have this number one geometry is that we're not actually going to be rendering this smoke in the blue form like we did in the previous scene. We're only going to be rendering it when it penetrates our number one. And if you remember, let's just go to our Cycles 4D real-time preview. What this is doing is quite clever. What we have got is our xPexplosiaFX smoke material, and it's referencing our xPexplosiaFX object, and it's taking the smoke information. But the material isn't on this. The material, look, is on our one geometry. And if I just go into that material again, if you remember the point density texture, so this is what is referencing our xPexplosiaFX object. It's taking the EFX smoke channel, and it's mapping it in world space, which means that when this smoke penetrates the number one, which is the geometry to which the material is applied, we get that smoke. And that's how it's working. Let's just bring that real-time preview up again. So if we hit play, you'll see that it's moving across, and it's moving through the volume of our number one. Brilliant. Okay. So that's the basic principle, pretty simple. So what we need is our scene objects now, our camera and our actual lighting. Remember, we made this plane just to demonstrate the technique when we built this scene. We don't need this to light it, so let's just delete that. Now we'll go to File, Open, and we want to go to any of our render build scenes because they contain the cameras and lights. Let's just do this one, hit Open. So I've got my scene objects, that's our camera lights, look. So let's hit Control C, and let's go to Window, back to One Smoke. I'm going to hit Control V, and now we've got lighting and our two different cameras. Okay. So now let's jump to our Cycles 4D layout, and there we are, we're ready to start building on this. So there we can clearly see the effect working. So let's go to our xPexplosiaFX. So this is just a point density texture going into a maths multiply, going into a volume scatter. I'm actually going to change that. Let's delete the volume scatter, and we're going to use that shader principled volume node instead. So let's put the multiply into the density, the volume into the volume, and there we are. So what do we need to do? Well, we need some color. We could just go into this color here on our principled volume, and we could just give it our green color. That's what color the smoke's going to be, and that looks pretty decent. But what we could also do is we could take this density information and we could remap that as a color and put it into the color channel. So let's just have a go at that and see if the result's any better. It may be, it may not be. Let's give it a try. So we'll go to Converter Color Ramp. Let's put the density into the factor, and that's kind of normalized that somewhat. It's made the darkest area is black and the lightest area is white. And then we can put that color into the color channel. So it's kind of added a bit more contrast and a bit more shadowy areas because we've got this black, and we can kind of move it back up like that to bring some of that back. And then we could change this knot to our green color. Something like that. And it's just giving us a little bit more detail. If I just switch off this node, so it's just taking the green, actually no, let's just cut that node, so it's just taking the green color. That's what it was. And this is what it is with our remap density. And what we could do as well is just multiply that. So let's borrow this maths multiply and put it here. And then put a greater amount. There we go. Bring in some more of that shadowing. Okay, so there's two different ways of doing it. Both work. This is with our color ramp remap density to add a bit more range in that color. And there it is without. And it's, I mean, much of a muchness, isn't it? It's a little bit brighter without. So let's just leave it without for now. Let's do a couple of things. We'll go to our render settings. Actually, just while we do this, we need to get saved up actually and make a new file out of this to stay organized. So let's sort our render settings first and then we'll do that. So we'll go to render settings. Let's load a preset. Here's our cycle start. Let's activate it. So we're going to be using this. All right. And then let's go to File, Save As. We'll go up one. We want to go to our render builds parent folder. Let's make a new folder and call it XP Countdown 1 Smoke. We'll go in there and then we'll save up. Excellent. Right, let's go back to our render settings. And what we want to do is we're going to be using a glass material in here. So we're definitely going to need some more ray bounces. Otherwise that glass material will be very dark. We're also going to add some volume depth. So this will give us the initial direct volume lighting, but then offers some indirect lighting as well, which will kind of illuminate it from within. So let's get that sorted there. Excellent. So now what we're going to do is we don't just want this volume. We want this smoke to be contained within a glass container. So let's go right click. We will go shader glass. Let's put the glass into the surface. And what we're going to do is let's just alt drag to cut that volume. So we're not getting anything. It's black. But if I add some roughness to this glass, you'll see that the glass is there. So we have the problem that our glass isn't at an angle where we're able to reflect these lights. So let's just adjust that. We can do it dead easily. If we go to the mode text, and go to caps, we can put a bevel on where the side meets the cap, which is going to catch the light. So look, let's put a fillet cap on, and there we go. Look, there we can see the bevel. Let's do one on the back as well, and let's constrain that so it doesn't make the geometry bigger. So now we've got a beveled one. It's too big. Let's take that bevel down to say 1 centimeter. All right, and look, we could try adjusting the steps of that bevel to see whether we get more interesting glints. And we could change the nature of it. It's a convex curved bevel at the moment, so we could change that to concave, so it's kind of curving inwards. Or this one's going to be good. Half circle is, yes, look, half circle is giving this really nice glint underneath. So that's looking good. So that's our glass object. Let's put our volume one back in. And now all of a sudden our volume looks much darker. And that's because our glass object is now, it's casting a shadow on our smoke. And we want rid of that really. So a very simple way of doing that is I'm just going to put on our number one, let's go to tags, cycles 4D tags, and let's put an object tag on. Remember, it's like a compositing tag. And let's just switch off shadow. And there we go, look. So it's no longer shadowing that smoke, the glass, and we're getting just this nice natural shadowing from the smoke itself. Okay, so that's looking very nice. I think we could get away with having the smoke perhaps a bit thicker, you know. Look, let's go to our maths multiply node, which is multiplying that smoke density value. Let's put this up to say, I don't know, let's try a 20. Yeah, so that's, I mean, that's a lot thicker. We've lost some of the detail. So then now we've done that, let's return to our color ramp. I tell you what, I'm going to get rid of our maths multiply that's preceding the color ramp. So all we're going to do now is remap the original density to this ramp, and then we can feed that into the color of our principled volume. And now we're getting a bit of detail back. It's a little bit too aggressive though. So look, let's move this knot up a bit, which is going to bring some of that back. Okay, something a bit like that. Okay, very nice. So now we're getting a bit of noise and the possibility of some fireflies. So let's address that. We'll go to the render settings and let's go up and we will do a 5 indirect clamp. All right. And we're going to have to address this noise with samples, but we'll look at that in a little while. So now if we go to a frame where there's no volume, we've just got this nice glint, but we don't want this on all the time. We somehow want this to nicely animate on this glass material. So we're going to do a really neat trick to get that to work. What we're going to do is bring in a transparent material. So let's go to shader, transparent. And we're going to mix these two together. So we need a mix node. So let's go to shader, mix. We'll put the glass in the bottom, transparent in the top, and put the output into the surface. Now at the moment, it's just mixing them with this factor. So if I go all the way to the left, it's just a fully transparent material, so we can't see anything. If we put it to the right, it's just fully a glass material. But this is what we're going to do. We're not going to drive this just with a slider. We are going to use the density value of our point density texture to drive that mix. So look, if I take this density and put it into the factor, now we can't see anything because there's no white values at the moment because there's no smoke. But as the smoke comes on, let's just move it forwards. As the smoke comes on, we start getting the glass appearing. Excellent. So what would be nice is, let's have a look. We can't see it that clearly. Let's just adjust the index of refraction of our glass to see if we can get a bit more of a glint. Or do you know what? Another tactic would be, what we could do is we could multiply this density value, which is going to kind of crush that, give it a more contrast really, and it'll give more areas the glint. So I'm just going to hit Control and copy, actually let's just hit that, copy this maths multiply, stick that up here, all right, and then with the index of refraction, let's just put that up slightly again. There we go. So now we're starting to get more of a glint. Let's move this in. And where we have smoke, we have glint. And where we don't have smoke, we don't have glint. So when we come back to a frame where the smoke starts to dissipate, the glint will start to go as well, and then it all disappears. Excellent. We perhaps don't need that to be multiplied by that great amount. Right, so that's excellent. Let's start just doing a couple of renders to the picture viewer. And then we'll start having a look at this at full resolution, and we could see if we need to make any further adjustments and see what samples we are going to need. So let's just go to a frame where we've got plenty of smoke in our scene. Maybe something like that. Yeah, that's a good one. Right, so let's go to our render settings. We don't want to save it. Let's go to Output, Current Frame. Yeah, let's go to Cycles 4D, Render Settings, samples. Let's just try first on, I'm going to say 30 samples. Hit OK, and let's just render that to picture viewer and see how long this is going to take to render. So we've got a lot going on here. We're viewing this pretty thick smoke through our glass. So look, we can see already there's going to be quite a long render. But I think it's going to be worth it really for the quality of the render that we're going to get. I really like these kind of secondary glints that we've got on our glass material. So that's looking pretty nice. There's a decent amount of noise, but I'm not too worried. I'm pretty much sure we're going to get away with that. It feels not bad. 39-second render isn't the end of the world. Yeah, I'm going to go with, let's just go back to our samples. Let's put this up to, say, 32. And I'm just going to put a few more ray bounces. Give that one more go. So this is going to have a hit on render times. Let's see if the quality that we get from this is worth that extra hit in time. And so what I would suggest to you is don't rush this stage. It can feel a little bit tedious doing test render after test render looking at these settings, but get it right now. Don't rush into your full render, because the worst thing you can possibly do is hit render. If it's a really long scene with long render times, it could be rendering all night. You get up in the morning and you put it in the comp and it's not right, and it's just a complete waste of time. So you're much better off spending the time now getting the render settings correct and workable, and then hitting the full render. So let's just A/B these. This is the higher render settings, lower, and you can see slightly less noisy, I would say, with the newer one. Ever so slightly. So I'm going to say that change wasn't worth the hit. So let's just go back to our render settings. Let's just stick this on 30. And again, I'm not rendering this full kind of production resolution, so I'm going to be pretty happy with that. So we can find out what our frame range is. We don't need to render all 220 frames here. We just need to get to a frame where there isn't any volume. So there's the first little bit. Let's bring it back. Okay, so frame 113, and then everything has disappeared at, before I forget 113, I'm going to type that in, 113. And then the last one, we want it where it's completely disappeared. There it goes. We've still got a bit of a glint there at 20. Still a glint. There we go, gone at 218. So let's put 218. So it's only 106 frames. It's going to be about an hour's render, probably. Okay, that's looking good. So let's go to our settings. Let's go to output. Let's double check everything. So I'm doing this 720p, 30 frames a second, manual frame rate. Let's go to save, activate this, and we want open EXRs. We're going to do 16-bit. We're going to have an alpha channel. We will get a file location. So let's go back to MoGraph Countdown. Let's go to Render Builds, Smoke. Let's make a new folder called Render. I'll just click that. Go into our render folder and hit Save. Great. And we're looking excellent. Good. So let's just hit that. I'm going to hit File, Save As. I'm going to call it this with a suffix of render settings. Hit save, and we're ready to go. Okay, so let's just whack that in, start it rendering, and we'll pause the video here and I'll come back to you once that's finished and we'll have a look at that animation. Okay, so that render's finished. That took 37 minutes to render in total, which is fine. It's looking pretty good. We've got a little bit of noise happening here, which we perhaps could have benefited from higher samples for production quality stuff, but that's looking pretty decent. So let's just play that through, and yeah, looking good. I like the way in which our glints only show up when the smoke is in contact and then they disappear, which gives us this really nice natural transition in and out. So this is looking good. Right, so that's it. We've got all of our renders finished now. The only thing that remains is to bring them all into After Effects and composite them together to create our final animation. So that's what we'll do in the next video.